All right. Settle down. Appreciate everybody being here this evening. We're going to finish up lesson 2. Obviously, we will not have any class next week, which I'm very excited about. So they get to kind of take what we've done so far and kind of figure out where we need to go from here. It's a nice little break after getting through the first couple of weeks of class. And I believe we left off Sunday with murder. So, an exciting cliffhanger there. So we will head to that. We talked about, we've been talking about, we'll skip back here, this slide, this idea of the slippery slope and the kind of responses, the way in which we respond to conflict. And, you know, they're kind of in 3 categories here. Escape responses, or what we might call peace faking, where we're kind of pretending nothing is happening. We're trying to put ourselves in a situation where we can ignore the problem. There are also attack responses, or what we might call peace breaking responses, because we're escalating the problem. That's what we're talking about right now. Then we're going to get into peacemaking responses that allow for us to reconcile, allow for us to get past whatever the conflict is and get back to a state of peace in our relationship. And so as I said, we left off with, in our discussion of peace breaking responses, we talked about assault. We talked about, someone might attack somebody. So often, when we think of the idea of assault, we think about, physical assault. But there are lots of ways that we can assault and attack someone. We can attack their character. We can intimidate them. We can try to damage them professionally, financially, damage their reputation. There's lots of ways that we can attack someone. We talked about litigation, and that's something that, as much as we think about it today, and there's you can't watch TV for 10 minutes without seeing an advertisement for a law firm or, a class action suit about something. We live in a very litigious society. And, when we read a lot of the New Testament, apparently that's not something completely new. Even in the first century here, lots of things, lots of discussion here in Paul's writings and Jesus' teachings about, the folks in that day who were constantly taking one another to law, as we might say, over these disputes that they should have been able to handle privately and on their own. And so the third, and again, thinking about this slope and kind of the extremes of it, the furthest extreme of the peace faking, we said, is suicide. If someone takes their own life in order to escape from conflict or situation. And then the opposite extreme of that is taking someone else's life to get out of, to resolve, in a sense, that conflict. And is murder a new concept? Doesn't seem like it, does it? Mary Lou was the first murder. How far back do we have to go? Yeah, Genesis chapter 4. Genesis chapter 4, and beginning in verse 1 there. If somebody would go ahead and read Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 16.
Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain was a tiller of the ground. In the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock of their fat, and the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. But the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry? And why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. Now Cain talked with Abel, his brother, and they were in the field, and Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and killed him. And the Lord said to Cain, Where is Abel, your brother? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, What have you done? The voice of the brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. A fugitive and a vagabond you shall be on the earth. And Cain said to the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth. And it will happen that anyone who finds me will kill me. And the Lord said to him, Therefore whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east coast.
So what is the conflict here between Cain and Abel?
Because Abel was rewarded we're kind of taught as kids that it was what being offered, but as adults we learn it's more of the attitude towards God. Abel's rewarded for his reverence, and Cain is not, and he's jealous of Abel, and it causes conflict between them.
Right. So this is one of those interesting conflicts where is Cain's problem really with Abel? Did Abel do anything to Cain? Did he harm him in any way? Did he slight him in any way? Who is Cain's problem with? Who is his conflict with? With God, right? As Tara said, it's about his attitude toward God. And, I think oftentimes we forget this little detail here in verse 7, that God talked to Cain and told him what was going on in his heart. He said in verse 7, we'll start back in verse 6, the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. God essentially came to Cain and warned him and said, look, you have gotten into a situation here where sin is crouching at the door. It's waiting for you. Its desire is to take you and to cause you to do things that you don't want to do. And said, all you have to do is to do what's right, and you will be accepted. But note what he says here at the end of his statement. Cain says, its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. That is the biggest struggle that I think all of us have with emotions, with our desires, the passions that we talked about in our introduction. Is we struggle to rule over those things. They are innate in God, this is chapter 4 of Genesis. I think God says these things to Cain because God is probably the only one who really understands what's going on here at this moment in time. And he's telling Cain, look, you have these desires, you have these passions, and you've got to learn to control them. You've got to learn to channel those feelings into something positive. But of course, we see that Cain failed to do that. And so he's out in the field with his brother. And I think there's something to that detail there. Why did he wait until he's out in the field with his brother?
Don't know when to see, no one to know.
Yeah. They're alone, right? I mean, as far as we know, there's only 4 people on the earth. So, It seemed like there was a lot of time for that. It's a great question, and perhaps that wasn't even his intent. And I think, that can often be said of a lot of murder. It wasn't his intent, perhaps, even. He wanted to, just take out his aggression on his brother, not realizing what he was capable of, maybe not yet realizing the fragility of life. Those are all valid points. But again, what God said to him there, he has to be the one who rules over these emotions to prevent something like this from happening. The stoning of Stephen is another great example of how an emotional response. We see here a mob, right? And this group of people who have gathered around Stephen, who have become angry with his teaching, is what they consider to be blasphemy. And I think there's a great lesson there for all of us in that, these people believed what they were doing was right. They believed that their attitude towards Stephen was righteous. In their eyes, just as the ones who crucified Jesus, in their eyes, Stephen was a blasphemer and needed to be punished. And I would imagine, just like your point there about Cain and Abel, probably likely wasn't his intent initially to murder. Maybe most of these people in this crowd, I would imagine that wasn't their intent. Probably all of them. They didn't get up that morning and say, we're going to go kill us a Christ follower. Well, what happened? There was a mob. And if you look in the text there in Acts, Acts chapter 7 and verse 54, it says, now when they heard these things, they were enraged, and they ground their teeth at him. But he, full of the Holy Spirit, gazed into heaven and saw the glory of God, and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. And he said, behold, I see the heavens open, and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. They cried out with a loud voice, and stopped their ears, and rushed together at him. So they cast him out of the city, and stoned him. And I don't think these people woke up that morning with a plan to do any of this. And so often we too can be carried away with a mob mentality, right? We get in a group and we're in a group of people with a like mind, a like purpose. I want to follow along with that group. It's very difficult for us to say, whoa, maybe we need to slow down. Maybe we need to think about what we're doing here. Inertia, as I like to say, inertia is a law. And when a mob like that and a group that starts to gain some steam, that snowball starts rolling down the hill, it's really hard to stop it. And even though all of those people are individually, making those decisions and doing those things, they're doing them as one, and it makes them all the more powerful and all the more difficult to stop.
Well, exactly right. So God created us for community, for, you say, when we come together for one mind. So you think about coming together for one mind for spiritual things, for example, how great it can be, and we're designed that way physiologically for a reason. So like that spectrum you were showing of like the fight, the flight, and then the more calm state. So your nervous system, at least everybody's nervous system in this room, is, whether we're conscious of it or not, feeding off of each other. And so if one of us gets very upset, the rest can calm us down by remaining calm, or we can all dysregulate together and we all get into fight or flight, and it just builds on itself because there's more people. And so it's all, I won't say it's more dangerous, because obviously Abel died too, but it's important that we remember that we feed off of each other in that way, and that we're created to do that, so that we can help other Christians who are maybe angry, it's so easy to jump into that negativity. I'd be mad too. I can't believe they did that to you, and what are we gonna do? And you should blah, blah, blah. But it's important that we remain grounded, not just to do the right thing ourselves, but to help with that fellow Christian kind of come back to their senses and kind of calm down and say, I understand you're upset, how can I help? Because you can bring another, your child's crying and very upset about something, and you hold it and you just kind of feel them relax and calm down. That's actually it's an emotional thing, but it's a very physical, central nervous system kind of thing. And so you get a group of people who are dysregulating each other instead of regulating each other, and it's complete chaos, loss of control altogether.
One person could have prevented this. One person was a loud enough voice to say, hey, look, let's hear this guy out. Let's calm down. Let's not act rashly. Could have stopped this. But again, they were not ruling over their emotions. And they were allowing what they thought was a righteous attitude to overtake them and cause them to do something as heinous as murder. But I also think that we need to remember what God's view of murder really is. We like to look for the lines, right? We like to tiptoe over to the line and say, well, I didn't kill the guy. I wanted to, but I didn't. He's a great person. What did Jesus say about that? Let's look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 21. Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 and 22. Somebody read that for us.
You have heard that it was said, those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell.
Well, a little different standard than what we prefer for ourselves. 1 John chapter 3 and verse 15. Everyone who hates his brother is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in you. If we are harboring hate and anger against our brother, against anyone that, even if they've done wrong against us, we are not mastering our emotions. We are not in control of our faculties in that way. And as God spoke to Cain, when we get in that state, sin is right there waiting for us. And from what Jesus said here, if we get into that point of hatred, of harboring that anger, sin already has us. It's just a matter of how far are we going to let it take us. We come to realize what we've done, what we've allowed to happen. I realize that, it's hard for us to wrap our minds around murder. But we all know of situations, there are situations in this county recently that I think a lot of us know people involved with that just seem unbelievable. Some of them may involve drugs and mental issues and different things like that. But I think it should give us pause to understand that God has given us capabilities to do amazing things. And those capabilities, as Tara said, in the wrong state, in the wrong hands, in the wrong group, can be turned to do the devil's work, to do his purposes, and to do awful and terrible things. And so we need to be the kind of people who are constantly examining ourselves, examining our attitudes, examining our emotions, kind of people who are seeking peace, not seeking to attack, not seeking to force our will on others in that way, to try to do even things that we might think have a righteous purpose. Any thoughts or anything you want to add to that?
Part of the mastery of emotions is, you take versus like the one Matthew 1 and think, well, I can't be mad. I can't be mad, I can't be mad. Well, then we get too anxious and get mad, and we get mad ourselves and we're mad. It's not the feeling that's sinful. Read through the Psalms and you see like some of the things David felt. And so giving ourselves and other people when we're trying to help them permission to, I understand why you're angry. Or giving yourself permission to talk it out, like even with yourself, with others, with God. It's not the emotion itself that we need to control as much as it's what we do with that emotion that we need to control. So if Cain had taken what God said and taken it to God and said, well, I'm really angry, God, I'm really jealous, and here's why, God would have helped him avoid that sin. But what we try to do is take that emotion and handle it our own way or ourselves, and not be ashamed to say we're angry or jealous. We get mad at ourselves and it just is sin. But you can take that emotion captive when you just settle into, okay, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And now what do I want to do? Versus just reacting out of it. Like I'm thinking about, you said one person can make a difference. Reuben, the brothers wanted to do this, and Reuben said, let's not kill him. What they did was wrong, but he did spare his life. And just one interaction with one person can change what we decide to do with that feeling. One prayer can change the way that we're able to take that captive. And we put that burden on ourselves alone so much that bitterness just kind of sits in. And when we allow ourselves to kind of be mindful about what we're feeling or share it with a wise Christian or a friend or in prayer, God will help us. We want to avoid that sin. God, I'm really angry. Help me not sin in my anger. Like, help me put it in my way. Help me find a resolution. This is how I feel. If we feel it, anyway, still base what's going and let him help us avoid sin.
It is righteous anger. Jesus demonstrated that when he looked over the tables and the money changers. And why was Jesus angry? What was righteous about his anger? They were
Take advantage of everybody that can
Confessing.
denigrating the Lord's temple. They were doing these things in his temple and just making a mockery of the whole place. But Jesus' anger was not for himself. And I think sometimes that's part of this idea of this righteous anger is what's making you angry. Is it for you? Or is it for righteousness' sake?
Something you always hear is hate the sin, not the sinner. The sinner still needs encouragement and love and, the hate the sin and who's behind that sin.
1 Peter 3:15, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. To do this with gentleness and respect. We need to approach the way that we teach others with that attitude of gentleness and respect, because we've all been somewhere where there was some group that claimed to be teaching the truth, but they did it in such a hateful way. How could it possibly represent the love of God? And the whole message is lost because of the way it's presented, and because of the attitude that it's presented with. You compare that to the way Jesus taught, and did Jesus ever miss an opportunity to teach the truth, to teach against sin, and to convict hearts? No. And he taught a lot of strong teachings and a lot of things that were counter-cultural, even to the strictest Jews, who seemed like, how can you even begin to be stricter than these people? But the attitude that he approached it with was what was so revolutionary. Boy, we've talked about murder for a long time, so we may not finish tonight, but we need to talk about peacemaking responses. And so again, going back to our slippery slope here. So we've talked about the two extremes, right? We've talked about the edges here. We've talked about the parts of this chart that we don't want to be. We don't want to be in the attacking zone. We don't want to be in the escaping zone, the peace-faking zone. We want to be in the middle. We want to be doing things that bring about peace and reconciliation, that cause whatever the issue is to be resolved in a God-honoring way. And so we need to understand what some of those things are. And, the Scripture is filled with teaching about these very ideas, about how we can approach conflict in God-honoring ways and use the resources that God has given us as Christians to handle these issues and to move forward in love and peace and unity within the body. And again, not only within the body here, but outside in the world. We can use many of these same things to create peace. And so let's talk about these ideas. We can kind of divide the 6 things that are on that chart into 2 different categories. The first one is personal peacemaking. And these are things that we do ourselves. If it's us and another person, we may be able to do this without involving the elders, church as a whole, whatever it may be. These are things that we can do on our own to quickly and effectively resolve these issues. And the first one is overlooking. And again, this chart again, because we talk about this, there's a thin line there between denial and overlooking. And that's a hard thing sometimes for us to understand and deal with. But there are some times that we just need to overlook it. If it's something that's insignificant, if it's something that, maybe it just really didn't bother us to begin with, maybe the best thing for us to do is, as a lot of your kids, if they were big into Frozen, talk to the children anytime, like that. Maybe they missed that. There are a lot of things that people hold on to that just really shouldn't be held on to. In Proverbs 19 and verse 11 says, good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense. We often talk about being slow to anger. And oftentimes, a big part of that is not allowing things to so easily get under our skin, right? Not allowing every little slight, every little, and so often it's not even a slight. It's something that, boy, I wish they'd just done that another way. Boy, I wish we'd have done it this way instead. Or whether it be something here in the church, whether it be something at work, whether it be something in our home, maybe you just really, really, really wish that however somebody cooks something, they could just put a little less pepper in it. Get upset about. Is that something to create this will they just do that? Aggravate me? Probably not. Sometimes that attitude comes from self-importance a little bit. We think, well, obviously, they're not doing it my way, so they're just doing it wrong. No, it's not that way, and so is everybody else. Maybe it's just fine. But there are things that we just need to be able to overlook, and that is a big part of being slow to anger, not causing problems where the problems don't need to exist. Colossians chapter 3, beginning in verse 12. Put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against one another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. Bearing with one another. I don't know how many actual members we have, or attendance ranges from 150 on up sometimes. There's a lot of people in this congregation, and we're all different. We all have different backgrounds, we all have different likes and preferences, and some of us root for Tennessee for some reason, and a lot of us root for the good teams, and there's just lots of differences that we have. None of them are in here, so we talk about them. And so those differences are fine. And it gives us things to learn and to experience in different ways, And when it comes to the different gifts and the different abilities that God has given us, that's what makes the church strong, when we allow it to do that. But when we have an attitude like Cain did with Abel, where it perhaps makes us jealous, or perhaps it causes us to feel upset about something, we can take those good things and we can turn them into real problems. But God has called us to be the kind of people who bear with one another. And the Scripture reminds us over and over again that we've got to have patience. We've got to have forgiveness and grace with one another if we can possibly expect God to do the same. And certainly, we do want that. And, we've got to think about how do we want to be treated by others when we make mistakes. And sometimes that's another one of our self-important faults is we get upset about other people's faults because we forget that we have our own, right? We forget that there are things that we do that drown other people. We may not know about it because they haven't been raised to not be like, hey, you need to stop doing that. And so we need to have that kind of grace as well. 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 8 says, above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. If you don't know what to do about a situation, I think this is a great place to start. Sometimes we're just not sure what to do, how to handle a situation. Where do we start trying to figure that out? Understand what love is. Understand, how do I love this person? Even though they're not doing what's right, even though they're not loving me back, not giving that as an excuse to sin, to escalate a problem, to make it worse than it already is, but just keeping that love on me until we can find a way forward. Reconciliation. And in all these situations, reconciliation is our goal. But reconciliation is something that has to happen when it's not something that we can overlook. If it's something that we can't just let go and forget about, we need to have the attitude that I want to solve this, and I want to be reconciled quickly. When we're denying, when we're avoiding, when we're in that kind of peace-making phase, we're not seeking reconciliation. And as we talked about with those things, we're allowing that problem to fester. We're allowing sin to crouch at the door longer, to drag us further down that hallway, and create the potential of further damage to our relationship, further damage to our relationship that could spill out into the church. It could damage other relationships. It could damage the unity of the body, and could certainly damage our influence to the world around us. So reconciliation needs to be our goal, and it needs to be our goal to do so as quickly as feasible. Matthew chapter 5, beginning at verse 23. Of course, Matthew chapter 5 is a section we'll come back to a lot over and over again. But Matthew chapter 5, verse 23. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. And we've talked about this verse before already, but Jesus is telling them, look, if you want to be reconciled to God, if you want to be right before Him, if you want to bring your gifts and to be justified before the Lord, you've got to have the humility to be reconciled to your brother. How can you expect me to forgive you if you're unwilling to forgive? Proverbs chapter 28 and verse 13. Whoever conceals his transgressions will not prosper, but he who confesses and forsakes them will obtain mercy. And I love the way that's put there. When we confess and forsake our transgressions, when we find these issues, we have this conflict, we're willing to just give up whatever it is that we're allowing to be a division between us, and to be reconciled, to confess our faults, rather than to try to conceal them. That is what will quickly bring about reconciliation, is when we're able to be honest about what's going on. In Matthew chapter 18 and verse 15, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. This is the first person we all like to tell about something somebody has done to us. Anybody besides that person. Anybody that will listen. We talked about Sunday. We like to Facebook our problems instead of facing our problems. We like to go to a friend and say, can you believe what so-and-so did to you? What should we be doing? What should our attitude be? Okay, that's a good start, yeah. We need to go to them, right? Because you know what, sometimes we're kind of blind. We're kind of ignorant of our own faults. Sometimes somebody just needs to come and say, hey, that hurt.
When it comes to trying to reconcile with others, I don't text ability, but I know there's a lot of people who text. And sometimes when you text, you try to reconcile or whatever, the text may not read exactly the way you think. And sometimes that can cause even more issues than initially was. So we're having this issue with our oldest daughter, back and forth, and I think each side is reading the text not the way the person expects it to be versus making a phone call, talking one-on-one, or meeting that with a person. That way, if there's a misunderstanding, it could be a one-on-one, face-to-face. Let's get this understanding.
Being mindful of the method is just as important as the message oftentimes. That's absolutely true. And, you know, sometimes, I mean, it happens in our lifestyle, you know, when you're trying to quickly send somebody a text and they take it the wrong way, you're like, whoa, that's not what I meant at all. But, you know, there's no inflection in a text message. There's no, and you start figuring out how to use them. You know, we're kind of, an email, you know, somebody sends you an email in all caps, it's supposed to be shouting. So try to avoid that, but, that's a great point, that you need to make sure that we're not taking shortcuts to reconciliation and creating further problems. That's a great point. But we need to have the heart for reconciliation, because I think, what does it say about us? What does it say about our relationship? What does it say about our attitude? What does it say about our attitude toward God and the church even, if we don't want to be reconciled? If we don't want to be reconciled quickly? You know, if we enjoy, heaven forbid, if we enjoy this conflict, having this thing to gossip about, to fuss about, that is really a concerning problem. And we need to be the kind of people that are going earnestly to talk about our disagreements, to seek peace. And it's not easy. It's not going to be easy, oftentimes. But hopefully, we have built a relationship with our brothers and sisters to where we know that we have that grace. And we know that we have the kind of relationship that we can say, I'm sorry, and how can I improve this situation? But also that we can go to them and say, hey, you know, you hurt me. And you may not know it. And I'm not here to beat you down. I'm not here to make this worse. I want to know how we can make it better. I want to know how we can walk in harmony once again. That's what God wants for us as His children. That's what He wants for our relationship with Him. But it's got to start with our relationship with one another, so that we can demonstrate that kind of love. And once again, we are not going to make it through even half of what I intended to get through today, but that's all right. I think we're having a good discussion. So we are going to pick up with the rest of these peacemaking responses next week after next. So we've got plenty of time to think about those in between now and then. I don't have the next lesson ready yet, and I'm not going to probably need it until then. So,
Extra time.
thank you, guys.